Gideon had won. The enemy was defeated. Israel had been rescued. The people wanted him to become their king. And Gideon refused. But victory can create a new kind of temptation. After years of fear, Gideon now had wealth, respect, authority, and influence. And the question was no longer, can Gideon defeat Midian? The question became, can Gideon remain faithful after the victory? His answer would shape Israel for generations. Gideon told the Israelites that he had one request. He asked each man to give him the gold earrings taken from the enemy. The Israelites willingly agreed. The amount of gold was enormous. Gideon used it to make an ephod. An ephod was associated with priestly worship. But something went wrong. The ephod became a spiritual snare for Gideon and his family. Israel began treating it as an object of worship. The same people who had been delivered from idolatry began drifting toward another form of idolatry. Gideon had torn down Baal's altar. Yet now, unintentionally, something connected to Gideon became a trap for the people. It is one of the saddest lessons in his story. A person can begin with great faith, experience incredible victory, and still become vulnerable to spiritual compromise. Despite the problems that followed, Israel experienced peace for 40 years during Gideon's lifetime. 40 years. The land that had once been terrorized by Midian was now quiet. Families returned to their homes. Fields were cultivated. Children grew up without knowing the fear their parents had known. Gideon returned to his home. He had wives and children. He became a respected man in Israel. His story had come full circle. The frightened farmer who once hid his wheat from Midian had become one of the most important figures in Israel. But Gideon's family story would become complicated. He had many sons. One of them was named Abimelech. And his story would become one of the darkest chapters connected to Gideon's legacy. Eventually, Gideon's life came to an end. He died at an old age. The man who had once been called a mighty warrior was buried in the tomb of his father. Israel had been rescued. The Midianite threat was gone. For a time, everything seemed peaceful. But after Gideon's death, something heartbreaking happened. The people of Israel quickly turned away from God. They forgot the Lord who had rescued them. And they forgot Gideon. The man who had delivered them from Midian was no longer remembered with the honor he once received. Instead, Israel returned to Baal worship. The cycle began again. Sin, oppression, crying out, deliverance, forgetfulness. The story of Gideon was becoming another chapter in Israel's repeated struggle to remain faithful to God. After Gideon's death, one of his sons, Abimelech, wanted power. He did not want to serve Israel. He wanted to rule it. And unlike his father, Abimelech had no hesitation about using violence. His ambition would lead to betrayal and bloodshed. He eliminated most of his brothers so that he could strengthen his claim to leadership. Only one brother, Jotham, escaped. From a hilltop, Jotham warned the people through a powerful story about trees choosing a king. The message was clear. Leadership without righteousness becomes dangerous. Power without character destroys both the leader and the people. Abimelech's story would eventually end in tragedy. But his rise reveals another lesson from Gideon's life. Gideon had refused the title of king. Yet his influence had created a family with enormous political power. And influence can become dangerous when it is inherited without wisdom. So, what can we learn from Gideon? Gideon's story is not simply about defeating an army. It is about what God can do through someone who feels inadequate. Gideon began afraid. God called him. Gideon questioned. God reassured him. Gideon obeyed. God gave him victory. But Gideon's story also teaches us that victory is not the end of the journey. After the battle comes responsibility. After success comes temptation. After recognition comes the danger of pride. Gideon teaches us to trust God when we feel weak. But his later years remind us to remain faithful when we become strong. The same man who once destroyed Baal's altar later became connected with an ephod that led Israel astray. His story contains both inspiration and warning. And perhaps that is what makes Gideon's story so powerful. He wasn't perfect. He was human. And God still used him. Maybe you feel like Gideon. Maybe you're hiding because you're afraid. Maybe you look at your circumstances and think, I'm not strong enough. I'm not qualified. I'm not important enough. I'm not the person God could use. Remember Gideon. God did not begin with a mighty warrior. He began with a frightened man in a winepress. God saw something Gideon could not yet see. And when Gideon obeyed, God used him to accomplish what seemed impossible. But remember the other side of the story, too. Don't allow success to take the place of God. Don't let blessings become idols. Don't let yesterday's victory replace today's obedience. Gideon's greatest lesson is not simply, be brave. It is, trust God, obey God, and remain faithful to God. Because the God who was with Gideon is still the God who works through ordinary people. If Gideon's story has encouraged you today, don't leave without sharing this message. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more cinematic Bible stories. And comment below, God can use me. Let those words be your declaration. Maybe you feel weak. Maybe you're facing something that seems impossible. Maybe you are standing before your own Midianite army. Remember, the size of the battle does not determine the size of your God. Gideon had 300 men, but he had God. And sometimes, that's all you need. Thank you for watching. Until the next Bible story, stay faithful, stay courageous, and never forget, God can use ordinary people for extraordinary purposes.
End.